My name is Julie Scully. I am a mom to two beautiful boys, aged 1 and 6, a wife, a sister, and a daughter, and a lawyer by training. I practiced for 5.5 years, starting as an associate in a large firm in Manhattan, and then transitioned to criminal defense with a sole practitioner. So I've been at both ends of the practice spectrum, large firm and very, very small shop. And then I transitioned into legal education in 2008 and never looked back. So I decided to go into law, like many, to make a difference. So that for me, it was affecting people's lives, day-to-day lives. And I think that I also in some way wanted to be a bright light in an otherwise dark spot, which is why I was drawn to criminal defense, though I don't know that I would have known that at the time or been able to articulate it. But I do think that that was part of my desire in a professional career. And I also very much prioritized living in an urban city, specifically New York. So I had two priorities as I was looking for work during law school. And I went to law school in the middle of America. So I am born and raised in Indiana, and it's where I studied law. And the transition from a small, like a smaller town or a more regional state to a larger, bigger urban city was difficult to do. And when I went to law school in the early 2000s, there was not the plethora of career services that there are now in American law schools. And so it was very much your own effort, your own journey to try to figure out where to go and how to get there. So I did that. And the interesting thing about that time for me was that it was very difficult to find criminal work, criminal jobs from when you weren't in the area, when you weren't living in the location. And so for me, it was much easier to find a job in a large firm where I ended up doing structured finance work than it was in a criminal job. So it was a gateway for me to get to the New York area, but it wasn't driven to do. And I know you might think like criminal defense and structured finance seems so opposite, and they really were. And I recognized fairly quickly that it wasn't the type of work for me. And there were a couple of reasons why I didn't love what I did. And or maybe things I just recognized doing that job. And the first one was the unpredictability of the hours. I mean, the hours were long, they were certainly long, but they're also very unpredictable. And I'm a type A planner, so you can imagine how difficult that is to not be able to plan anything, including your dinners at night. And the second, or maybe there's two, maybe three. The second was just the lack of interaction with the client. I mean, our clients were big mortgage companies or banks. Once a year, I would get to see their faces at a client party we would have, but otherwise they were voices on the phone, and I didn't even get to talk to them that often. So there was a real lack of interaction with people other than my coworkers, which was the highlight of the job for sure. And the third was I looked around at what the senior associates and the partners' lives were like in the firm that I was in, and that was not where I wanted to go. That was not my long-term career goals, and so they just didn't align. And for me, those were all signs that I was not in the right place. And I also don't love math or numbers, and I love writing, and I didn't get to do any writing, and I was surrounded by numbers constantly, and it was like very, very difficult for me to pick up because that wasn't what that's not what I wanted to do. So I basically had to start over, and I did look at doing other careers. I thought about obviously transitioning out of law entirely at that point. So I thought, if this is what I'm going to do, maybe I should think about doing something totally different. And one of the areas I looked at was actually education. So I thought about teaching. I thought about, being in the classroom and trying to, getting energy from other people, kids, or even high schoolers. And New York City has a teaching fellows program that I very much looked into at the time. And I also thought about trying criminal defense, which was the reason why I went to law school in the first place, and seeing whether or not that is something that that would fit my life better. And I did end up moving into criminal defense, and it was a difficult transition, mostly because I had to start over professionally. So I'd been out of law school for 2.5 years practicing, but I hadn't done criminal defense. And so you basically have to start your career in that area over. And then that's what I did. And I worked for a sole practitioner doing that for 3 years. I recognized then that also it wasn't the right fit for me. And for kind of similar reasons, but a little bit different. And there were a couple of big ones. The hours were just as long. I mean, they really were. So I did not get the work-life balance that I was seeking. And the second was, I did not like spending my days in an adversarial way. I did not like fighting, arguing with whoever, the state, your own client. Like, this is just not the way I wanted to spend my days. Though I did feel like I was able, and it was part of it was I got satisfaction from being the light in a dark place. I mean, think about it. You are dealing with people on their absolute worst day. I mean, this is the worst time of their life. And so there's a real opportunity there to make a difference in a positive way, but it's very draining individually and, kind of emotionally on you as the lawyer working with, criminal defense clients. So while the opportunity is big, it is all consuming. And so for me, some of the reasons why I left my structured finance job ended up being the same. I still was lacking the work-life balance. And while I had the interaction with people, it wasn't in the positive way that I was hoping for. And so I did something that I was just so antithetical to my personality, which is I quit the job with nothing lined up. And I remember having a conversation with my dad about it, where I was like, I just can't do this anymore. But I didn't have the time to look for any other work, nor did I really know what I wanted to do. He said, I think you have to quit. And that's just as a type A planner, very risk adverse. That was a difficult decision for me to do, but it was the right one at the time because it gave me the space, the reflection, the time that I needed to think about what I really wanted to do. And I took 3 months, which was in the summer, which is a lovely time to be in New York, to think about what it is that I really wanted to do. And I recognized a couple of things about myself is that I really wanted to work with people in a positive way. And I wanted to stay connected to the law. I wanted to do something where my background and my experience was still relevant. And legal education seemed to be the perfect marriage. And as I said before, like teaching, being in a school, that was something I was interested in too. So I really managed to kind of combine all of those. I didn't know if I was going to like it at the time. Oh, and the work-life balance. So maybe there were 3 things that I was really prioritizing then. And I got a job at an institution in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Law School, in 2008. And it ended up being the perfect fit, and I never looked back. So it brought me all of the things that I wanted: the work-life balance, the connection to the law, and the positive work with people where you get to be a part of a journey, a positive journey, a journey through education that is it ended up being what I thought was a job, ended up finding my path.